Hello YouTube vintage stereo collectors. So I've got the KA-2000a, the UK version, the Trio badge, that came to me from the UK with a 220 volt plug-in cord. What's interesting about these is it has all of them have North American accessory power outlets, but it is labeled AC 220 to 240 volt. And I figured out how to convert this ball, which doesn't have a 220/120 switch, sort of by trial. I bought one of these, one of the very first ones I bought on eBay, and it was shown as in US dollars. I think I won it for around 40 US dollars when shipping was about 10, and I didn't realize it was coming from the UK. So it arrives and I'm like, it's got this big walloping dryer plug on it, And I'm like, oh, how am I going to do that? Well, I guess I'll have to get a converter. I had a travel converter that was actually electronic rather than a transformer one. And I tried it out and it did work, but it was causing the transformer to have kind of a jagged sounding hum. And I didn't want to do that for more than a minute, And I thought, I don't want to always have to have a transformer beside it. And these should, run wherever they're operating, they should just plug into the wall. So I decided to recap the unit, and I looked at this schematic and I was like, well, there's the switched version with the 120/240 switch, and then there's one with the same transformer, but it's not switched, it's just hardwired. And that's this one. And then I'm like, okay, how do we figure out those leads? And how do we put it into 120 volt? So I looked at what happens when the switch is over in the 120 volt mode, 117 volt, whatever you want to call it. It changes them from series to parallel. So in series, you have the core, and you have a 220 volt peak sine wave. It hits the core, saturates it, then falls, then generates current in the other side for your 6.3 volts and your 30 volt center tapped. Okay, if you hook them up in parallel, so you have a 120 volt hitting them simultaneously in the same direction, in parallel, it does the same thing. That's the whole premise behind it. Now, there's these colored wires. So I trace them out, okay. Red comes from the power switch. And then I figured out that the white and blue are tied together. No. Like, it took a little while to figure it out, right? So then I just made it very simple. 120 volt. Red and yellow are tied, because that's the top of the winding for the first winding and top of the winding for the second winding. Blue and white are tied together back through the fuse to the plug. This is a weird thing about Kenwoods. You'll see this on some Yamahas as well. You have one side of the cord through the power switch, maybe a switched outlet there, a capacitor just so you don't hear pop, and then it goes through the core and then through the fuse and back. I don't know why they did it that way. That's how they did it. Now, another thing I noticed on this had a little casualty here. The metal plate that was on the bottom had a nice cinder on the bottom. This cap that absorbs the shock and turning off and on blew. There's a little bit of oil on it. So we need to replace it. I would anyway. So what I'm going to do is take out the remnants of the power cord just by clipping it like that. These will come out. And it's going to take a little bit more effort. So I didn't want you to see the 10-minute wrestling match to get that in. Sometimes you got a newer cord that's just a little bit thicker, and this is a thinner cord, you know what I mean? This is a Kawasaki, but newer, polarized. but I like them a little longer on the amp too. The original one, I don't know where a piece of it went, but this had a 120 volt cord and a grafted on UK plug, which is kind of interesting. But anyway, now we just need to convert it to the right voltage. So there are the leads from the new power cord. So what I basically do is I look at the power switch. I think I accidentally nipped off one of these. Yes, I did. That's the white lead from the transformer. Oh, that's interesting. Where did that go? Oh, it went on there. Okay, so alright. See how there's lots of extra lugs here? Well, what I do is I take a couple of spare ones and make a tie down point. So let's just free up the leads going to the power transformer. There's the white. The red is over here. Get this little blown cap out of here. So I'm going to do a bit of desoldering here. So just to tell you where I'm at here, cord is attached, grommet's secure. One side goes to the fuse holder, comes through the fuse. There's the capacitor that's basically keeps from, so you don't hear a snap from the power switch. Then you have this blue wire here, which goes to the blue and white on the transformer. So that is, of the two windings, it's the lower side of each winding. The red and yellow here is the upper side of each winding. So they're in phase. And that goes through, it's onto this switched outlet here. And on the right side, goes back to the power switch. So everything looks right there. Gotta make sure here that nothing can, when the bottom cover goes on, that nothing's going to touch and short out. So I thought what I'd do is, I'm going to try this one out with power. See what happens. It probably blew the fuse because that capacitor blew. Just going into the headphone jack with some phones. Make sure the volume's down. Turn it on. Oh, sound. Pop. Hiss in both channels. Yeah. Yeah, it's doing something. It is amplifying. That's for sure. Getting a tiny bit warm. Let us just check with a meter what the voltage is at the main cap, because that's what counts here. Go on the chassis. On the main cap should be around 39 volts, around 40 volts. And over here, this is in the phono stage, 19. That is where it's supposed to be. Let's just quick check the bias on the negative again. So we just need to, there's two bias resistors between ground and an emitter. 76 millivolts, 37. So bias is a bit high. I'm not going to run it too long. Yeah. The amp is working, so it's just a matter of going through it and putting the rest of it into good shape. but is now working on 120 volts AC, and it's been permanently converted with a North American plug. Thanks for watching and listening.